I am a layperson with no medical training whatsoever. I'm very curious, but I don't know a lot about this space. But one of the things that has come up to me historically has been keto. And I have a lot of questions about keto. I will tell you, I've experimented with keto. And for me, at least as I was doing it as a layperson with not a lot of experience, I didn't find it worked really well for my body. However, I recently lost about 45 pounds in 4 months.
Congrats.
Thank you, sir. I did that just by low carb. But I'm curious about keto because of the benefits. So what is, and I'm going to ask you to take off your expert hat here for a second.
Yeah.
But if you were talking to someone who knew nothing about keto, how would you explain keto to the layperson?
Yeah, great question. Ketosis, right? It's more of a metabolic process. And I know that word kind of gets lost on people. Simply, you're burning body fat for energy.
Okay. As opposed to?
Sugar and glucose.
Sugar and glucose. So if my typical diet is, let's say I'll have granola for breakfast, maybe I'll have a burger for lunch, then maybe I'll have like a chicken and some salad, chicken Caesar salad for dinner. What am I actually burning out of those 3 meals?
You're a sugar burner. Okay. Yeah. If you have carbohydrates that go above 50 grams per day, which it will with those examples, you're going to burn sugar.
Okay.
And the body, the metabolism has 2 primary sources for energy, either sugar or fat. In other words, glucose or ketones. So when you eat too many carbohydrates, you're stuck burning sugar. When you lower your carbohydrates, you access your fat stores, your body produces ketones. So it's simply, ketones are simply a side effect or a byproduct of burning fat metabolism. So
here's where I think the lay people would say, well, okay, here's my concerns with this keto diet. First of all, I'm eating so much fat, and we'll just assume that fat has been inappropriately demonized versus other things. We'll just skip ahead to that. We'll make that assumption. But I have to ingest all this fat, which seems counterintuitive. And 2, I'm worried about my cholesterol because, I'm eating a lot of maybe meat now and different things to try and do healthy keto versus, of course, you can do ugly keto, I guess.
For sure.
So how do you think about that?
Fat is vital for our body to thrive. We have 70 trillion cells, and every cell has a protective layer around it, and it's made up of fat. It's made up of saturated fat, cholesterol. The brain is mostly fat. To your point, we have demonized cholesterol as the boogeyman. And in reality, cholesterol is vital for our hormones, our brain function, for fat loss. So yeah, you're going to eat fat, but fat is vital. And when you eat fat, what's different than eating carbs, there's not a glucose response.
So explain what a glucose response is. So I just had my chicken Caesar salad, lots of croutons.
You got a glucose response. So
how long does that take? Like, kind of paint that picture for me.
So there's 3 different macronutrients, just to break it down for the audience, right? There's protein, there's carbohydrates, and there's fat. Those are the 3 primary macronutrients. Glucose is the sugar that goes up in your body when you eat a certain macro. So carbohydrates will raise blood sugar, or glucose, same thing, higher than protein and fat. Fat doesn't touch the dial on glucose or insulin. And 93% of Americans are stuck burning sugar. They're in a fat burning deficiency, or in other words, a keto deficiency. So they need to lower their carbs and teach their body to burn body fat. Eating fat is going to allow your body to do that because you're not going to get that blood sugar spike.
So let's talk about healthy fats. What are some of the healthy fats? If I'm curious about a keto diet, but I'm a little bit nervous, what are some of the healthy fats that are like kind of easy to incorporate? Just to give me an idea of like what that could look, the future state I'm living in ketosis.
Yeah, and to answer the question before as well, and then I'll get into that, cholesterol is not an issue. As a matter of fact, Harvard put out an article in 2009 showing more people die from heart disease with normal to low cholesterol than high cholesterol. It's absolutely backwards, my friend. So it's not cholesterol that causes the heart disease. As a matter of fact, there's only one cause of heart disease, and that is damage to the blood vessel. That's the only cause of heart disease. Now, what causes that is multifactorial, but the number 1 leading cause is high insulin levels. So you can see how keto actually lowers risk of heart disease. Fats, to answer your question, grass-fed meats, poultry, seafood, eggs, avocado oil, olive oil. These are called saturated fats and monounsaturated fats. So if you just do a Google search or look for saturated and monounsaturated fats, anything on that list is good.
I like that. Okay, so I'm ready to give keto a try. I've planned out my meals for the first week. Maybe I'm using a service that's going to drop the meals off for me. So I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I'm locked in. I get 3 days in, and this is what happened to me. I felt I was eating so much fat. my body didn't feel good. Everything about me did not feel good. And I pulled the chute. And it wasn't keto flu. I wasn't having those type of symptoms.
Right.
For whether it's my body type or whatever, or it was just an adjustment period that I wasn't prepared for. I was struggling with just the amount of fat I was eating. It felt uncomfortable for me. Is that typical?
See that a lot. And the number one cause of it is the liver. The liver produces bile. The bile breaks down the fat. And if the liver is not producing nice, healthy bile, you have trouble breaking down the fat. So you have a scenario where you're increasing your fats, but you can't break it down because the bile is thick. So it's a simple solution, though. You eat more bitters. I always tell my students, bitters for the liver. So bitter-rich foods, apple cider vinegar, arugula, ginger tea, dandelion greens, lemon, limes, oregano, thyme, rosemary, coffee is even a bitter. So the more bitters you have, it'll help the liver produce that bile or break down the fat. You could also supplement with ox bile supplementation or digestive enzymes, which helps to break down the fat.
Interesting. Man, I'm looking at this a whole new way already. You just sat down 5 minutes ago. Okay, so I'm eating keto. So let's talk about keto flu real quick, because that's one of the things. Again, if I just Google keto, I'm going to see keto flu. What is that actually, and what is the experience like? If I did experience that.
That was not keto flu what you had. You were
Correct.
accurate when you said it was different. That was more of your body not being able to break down the fat, and that just results in you not feeling well. Sometimes it results in like fatty stools or diarrhea as well. Keto flu is different. So the keto flu is really an electrolyte imbalance. So what happens is when you're eating high carbs, like most Americans eat 300 grams of carbs per day, high amounts of glucose raises insulin levels, as I mentioned, but you retain a lot of water when you have high insulin levels, when you eat a lot of carbs. When you lower your carbs, now you lower your insulin, which is good. So the body's shedding all this excess water weight.
Okay.
That's why a lot of people see the scale go down real fast in the beginning. It's mostly water weight. So you feel lighter, you're less puffy, all good things. But here's the issue. The kidneys go through this diuresis process where it's shedding all this water, and what goes with it? Electrolytes. And when that happens too fast, you have these symptoms that occur that feel like you have the flu. Brain fog, you feel sick. That is what the keto flu is. Simple solution. On day one, you just have those electrolytes. You keep it up. An even better idea, instead of going from 300 grams of carbs per day to under 50 to get into ketosis, you have a gradual decrease as you keep the electrolytes up, and you don't have to experience that keto flu.
It's like he has all the answers. I like this conversation. This is pretty exciting. So then what are a lot of doctors, especially with like cancer patients, have recommended like a keto diet. A lot of patients, maybe they don't have a lot of answers. Why aren't more doctors in general talking about keto and the option and opportunity that it is?
Most doctors think of keto and they think of the word ketoacidosis. Even the Mayo Clinic, if you do a Google search, they'll say keto is dangerous because of this process called ketoacidosis. Ketoacidosis is a problem, but that is not the same thing as ketosis. That's more of a type 1 diabetes issue. If you do keto, you could have high amounts of ketones and it's very dangerous. Very rare. So I want to just distinguish that. But most practitioners still think of keto as ketoacidosis. Keto can be a powerful tool in combination with other modalities for cancer. I'm actually a nutritional advisor for this company called Aminosine, and they do immunotherapy for cancer at Cancun. So I work with their patients as they go through the therapy to get them on a keto diet. And the reason why is because it's anti-inflammatory. And it's only going to help whatever condition, cancer, diabetes, autoimmune, whatever it is, if you lower the inflammation. Inflammation is the driver for all of these. So when you eat fat, think of that energy source as a gas stove versus burning firewood and all this smoke that's glucose. So it's a cleaner energy source, it lowers inflammation, and you get 400% more energy. So that's why people are like, oh my gosh, I feel alive again. I got to actually focus at work and not fall asleep, because those ketones help your body produce 400% more energy via something called ATP, but it's just 400% more energy because of those ketones.
Should everyone be on a keto diet?
I think that everybody should use it as a tool. I don't think I'm not a fan of long-term ketosis. I'm a fan of going back and forth, which is more like metabolic flexibility.
Interesting.
So I have a book called Keto Flex, all about this. It's about, all right, 93% of Americans are sugar burning. They're in a keto deficiency. Let's flip the switch, get them into ketosis and burn fat. Once we restore that metabolism, then we have them go back and forth. And some days are keto days, some days are higher carb days. That's the way I personally live it and recommend it. I think everybody is designed to do that. Yes.
So let's break that down, because I was going to go down that path. I'm super curious. If I'm in ketosis, in my mind, because again, for the layperson, everything I've read isn't going to stay in it. So what happens if it's, so we'll talk about the intermittent opportunities, but let's say I've done keto all week and then Friday night I have a pizza. What happens to my state of ketosis?
Depends on how long you've been doing the keto. In the beginning, you don't want to have that pizza. You want to get what's called fat adapted, which simply means you're burning fat instead of sugar.
How long should that take?
7 days or so.
Okay.
But then eventually the ultimate goal here is to get keto adapted. Now that's a very, very different process. Keto adaptation means now your cells, especially the mitochondria, are primed to use ketones. And you have a whole host of benefits. So when we look at all the studies on keto, as it relates to lowering inflammation, reversing type 2 diabetes, helping with cancer, those are studies done on those who are keto adapted. That takes a little bit longer. That's about 2 months. So what I teach my students is let's get you into ketosis safely and leave you there for 2 months, get you keto adapted. Then you can have the flex day. Ideally, I don't want it to be pizza, but if you're going to have pizza, that would be the time to do it.
Let's talk about, how long this cycle takes. You mentioned men, the hormones kind of rotate, or what's the right word?
They fluctuate within a 24-hour pattern.
But women, it's 28 days.
Yeah.
So how should men and women look differently at engaging in ketosis?
And going in and out, the flexing part. So men, as you mentioned, have a 24-hour hormone recycling pattern, we'll call it. So think of that as the sun comes up and it sets within 24 hours. So it's a more rapid response versus menstruating women who have a 28-day hormone pattern. And that's more like the moon. Right? You have the full moon that comes out every 28 days. So men could be more aggressive. Men could flex in and out on a daily basis by having, let's say, keto-friendly meals for breakfast and lunch and then a higher carb meal at dinner, or flipping that around. Or I like this for most men because it works for their schedule. Monday through Friday, keto. Saturday, Sunday, flex out. I typically do that myself. Menstruating women, there's more nuance with that cycle, and we do it week by week depending on different hormones that go up and down during their cycle.
If there was only a book that I could follow and track all this with.
I think Keto Flex book, chapter 12 is all about the women, and then the other chapters are about men too.
Interesting. What was interesting for me was that I felt that, when I did the low carb, and so I was eating basically 1,200 calories a meal. I was eating my whole life I've lifted weight, and I never did 1 gram of protein per target pound of body weight. I did that. And I said, okay, here's my 1,200 calories or whatever it is for meat. And then I was a little bit flexible with the rest, but I generally kept it pretty low carb. Within about a week, the thought of sugar or eating a carb was repulsive. And then when I would have it, I would feel so awful just from the low carb. Is that typical?
Yeah, you change your palate. Right? When you eat more fat and protein, and I don't want to get too sciencey here, but your body activates these hormones and chemicals that help you feel full and satiated. This is why, for example, if you went to a restaurant and you had a 16-ounce ribeye, whole bunch of protein and fat, it's a pretty big steak, right? And they say, hey, we're giving you another steak on the house. If you could eat it now, you'd be like, no way I could eat another steak. I'm so full. But if they say, here's the dessert tray, I could fit that in. Why? Because carbs don't activate those chemicals. Protein and fat does. So it prevents you from overeating. It changes your palate. And then when you do have the sugar, your body got so familiar with functioning without it, you're more sensitive to it. When you're eating it all the time, you're numb to it. And that's the reason why you notice the difference there.
Fascinating. Where can we find you?
benazadi.com.
And what is if I'm buying one book on keto, what is it, Ben?
Keto Flex, ketoflexbook.com. If you enjoyed that conversation, be sure to watch this next video all about visceral fat and the top ways to blast belly fat.
A biomarker called visceral fat, and it's the earliest expression of chronic disease that occurs in the human body. You should be wondering, when does it start? And the answer is visceral fat, and it begins in your childhood.